And there we go. Welcome, visionaries and change makers, to Lead with LeAnn, where we navigate the waters of business with heart and purpose, airing every week at 2 p.m. Pacific time, exclusively on winwinwomen.tv. I am LeAnn Lyon, your Chief Joy Officer, here to empower you with the strategies, insights, and a splash of fun. Each week here on Lead with LeAnn, you'll join me as we delve into the inspiring stories of established leaders and innovative entrepreneurs. We'll uncover just what it takes to build a brand from scratch, lead with authority and grace, and turn business aspirations into tangible success. So anchor down, set your sails, and let's dive into the art of joyful leadership. Get ready to be inspired because your journey to business brilliance starts right now. Today, my guest is a trailblazer in leadership, coaching, and DEI strategy, leveraging her extensive background in law, HR, and organizational development to drive transformative change. Get this. As the founder of Transformative Leadership Collective, she empowers leaders to cultivate equity-driven cultures. This is going to be an awesome conversation. With over 16 years of practicing social justice law in New York City, can you imagine? And at NYU Law School, Nasoan's expertise is unparalleled. She is committed to fostering effective leadership and inclusive environments. Nasoan, are you there? Come on forward. We'd love to see you. There she is. The brilliant professor, the lawyer, the woman right here. She, her, and hers. Welcome.
That's quite an introduction. Thank you. Good to
It
be
was
here.
so much fun. How much fun can we have in one day? It's
How are
great to
you
be
today?
here. I am great. What did we miss? I mean, it's all about business there. Like, you're in Pacific time now. You know, I talked about New York and NYU, but you're not East, you're West
Right.
now.
Yeah, there's been a big transition. So even coaches have life transitions. Mine included a move across country. It included a shift in my career, and all of that sort of happening within the same 18-month period. So that's when
Wow.
I landed in Los Angeles, and it's been a very fun and interesting journey. And all along the way, just kind of trying to keep up with all the challenges that come with a move.
And how long have you been out there now?
It's been a year, almost 13 months now.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So relatively new. Have you found the nearest target? That's like the first goal.
The goals are shifting, actually. It turns out
Okay.
when you start to make shifts in your life, it sometimes changes the way you see things. And,
Good.
you turn that vision onto the business side of things, and it makes you think, oh, there's more. There's more I could be doing. There's different things to kind of do to address the concerns I want to address. So it's been a stimulating period.
Cool. Does that have anything to do with Target? I meant the store, you know.
Not really, not that I know of.
I've had two moves in the last 3 years as well. One was across town, one was then next door. I
Okay,
won't say that one was any easier than the other at all.
doesn't matter. Yeah,
But at least the second move, I didn't have to find the grocery store again.
that's
It was
funny.
pretty
Yeah,
much the same one.
I can relate. I had a short move of my own, which was literally from one floor to the next in a building. So that was about 2 years before this move, and I
Okay.
can attest to the fact that it was just as unsettling to
Yeah.
go, within the same building as it was to go across the country.
Yeah. I actually did do that once too. One story up, the
Yeah.
same layout.
Wow.
Yeah.
You
One
didn't even have to
story.
buy any furniture.
No, no, just move. It just, but you get all the way down the hall, up the elevator, all the way down the hall. We actually, I think we actually did like remove drawers and just put them back in and change them out. So maybe a little bit easier for that.
Yeah.
So, so I'm interested though. You said that things shifted, other things shifted as well, not just a physical location. Like what?
Well, I think the first thing that shifted was I got the kind of excitement of a new experience. Anytime you do something new, you kind of have fresh eyes. So I felt like I had the experience of being almost like a baby,
Oh,
at things that I kind of had been doing, the same way for about 27 years.
mm-hmm.
Because my move was from a place I had lived for that long. So it
Okay.
really kind of reminded me that we need to have experiences that are new in order to keep the fresh and exciting approaches that are helpful for entrepreneurs. And it felt like those two things coming at the same time were all really important.
Yeah, good. So I kind of I feel like there's something even like a different level though. Like did it shift unexpected things like how you ate or how you shopped or did you notice shifts like that as well then?
I think
You can say no. I'm
probably,
just
like, I think what happened was the shifts that I noticed were kind of just part of my day to day. Like, literally everything was new. So,
yeah.
everything from my morning commute
Uh,
to, like you said, grocery shopping became a whole new thing, right? So, nothing was rote.
yeah.
You know how you kind of get in the practice of, like you said, you go to the same grocery store, you kind of know where everything is. You can
Hmm.
easily find what you need and get in and out, and nothing is really a surprise.
Yeah.
The experience of literally moving across country to a brand new city that I'd literally never lived in, everything from just the basics of getting groceries every day to
Yeah.
obviously like how am I going to run this business now from this vantage point? Am I still interested in kind of giving the same offerings, or am I starting to have a broader vision? And that's what happened for me, was that it sort of broadened the way I was thinking about my work.
Oh, I can't wait to dig into that and we
Yeah.
will. I am but I was just thinking culturally, you're right. I mean, New York City to LA. I mean, from a let's say flyover country perspective, because I'm in Minnesota, and I know you call us that.
Never, never say that.
Some people do. So rude. Um, but I mean, I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's still a top 50 metro area in the United States anyway. But even Minneapolis, St. Paul looks at New York and LA like, whew. And now, of course, we have a third metroplex showing up in Texas, the Dallas Fort Worth. They're saying is going to be bigger than what LA is, which is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, they're expanding so much thanks to California. A lot of Californians moving to Texas.
Right.
But culturally, I mean, not just a physical location, not just weather. I mean, New York, you think of the weather difference between New York and LA, kind of different. But then there's a whole
Very.
cultural difference. I have my opinions on what I think the cultural difference is, but what did you notice?
That's such a good question. Because it is fascinating to me that it's so different. And I would say I think that New Yorkers work differently
Hmm.
than they do in LA. Not that they work harder per se, but they just work really differently. And I find that a lot of the people I meet here find a way to bring a little more like recreation to their day in a way that New Yorkers kind of just like give up. It's sort of like you're like, oh, well, I'm going to live in New York City. I'm not going to have necessarily like access to the beach or I'm not going to go on a hike necessarily as part of my day to day. Whereas here, that nature is so readily available, you're surrounded by it. Like even on your commute to work, you make a turn and you're surrounded by beautiful mountain landscapes, and it just kind of changes the way you see things when you have that around you. And I mean, for myself, I've been able to sort of incorporate a practice of being in nature on a regular basis. And I wasn't getting that in New York, and it's part of what made me leave.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when I think of LA, I don't really think of nature that much. I really think of it as the miserable city I was last in. I'm just kidding. Well, I just
A
did not.
sprawling,
It's horrible.
sprawling,
It's
you
really
know,
bad. Yeah.
metropolis.
Well, so I'm gonna, now that we heard a little bit from you, I'll share mine and let's talk about it because my experience with New York, and I love New York, to visit, but after a week, I need to see a horizon again.
Hmm.
There are no horizons in New York unless you're right at the edge of Manhattan or something. You can see something of a horizon. But if you're in Manhattan, you do not see a horizon and you can't necessarily just walk to the edge. I mean, it's a big,
Yeah,
Manhattan's wide. So you've got that. And then you've got, steep, just, it's all concrete. I mean, there is the occasional park and little corners and stuff like that. That's great. But you're right. It's business. You get up, you go. Um, it's and you're on time. Your meeting starts, you're there. And my impression in LA was, and this is one reason I actually did not enjoy LA, was, oh yeah, I'm running a few minutes late, and they're an hour late, and I'm now 3 appointments behind because everybody's an hour or two late, and I couldn't maintain my own schedule, which for
yeah,
me was an issue.
yeah.
Um,
Traffic. I mean,
it
it's unpredictable.
And that's why, the hour or two late, it wasn't really necessarily their choice to be late, but in Swedish, there's a word called lagom, which is about being just kind of chill and relaxed with,
Yeah.
what is. And we don't have an exact translation, but I think that's how I see LA being about business. And it just isn't for me. I'm a little more East Coast than West Coast with that attitude. Okay, you fill in.
Mhm,
What did
mhm.
I hit and what did I miss?
Well, I mean, I think there's just a different um, energy
Yeah.
because I think people just work differently. I
Yeah.
don't think they aren't kind of doing the work. They're just on a different schedule,
Yeah.
and they are kind of coming with I think the lifestyle choices of being like a Southern Californian are so much a part of why people are here
Yeah.
that their days have to include more than work. So I think that brings us different energy into the workplace
Mm-hmm.
than like you experience, like you said, in New York, where it's just go, 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 go. Like if we have a conversation that is not necessarily about the work we're sharing together, it's meant to further this work we're doing together. It's not necessarily meant to deepen our connection to one another. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
always, but sometimes it feels like there's more of a focus on the doing of the work and less about like the relationships that are necessary to, really facilitate good work getting done.
So New York is about doing and California is a little bit more about being. Would
Yeah,
that be
that's a
fair?
good way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. One other question I have, since you've experienced more of this I've been a week here or there, but what would you say the typical work hours are for a typical New Yorker versus a typical Southern California work hours? When do you start? Because there's a 3 hour time zone difference too, you know.
True, true. I think it's actually interesting you mentioned that because I think that might make it easier for the data end here.
Uh-huh.
I think that's what I've noticed is that the in New York as a lawyer, and I worked in a nonprofit setting, so I wasn't billing hours. my day was about 10 hours of work, whether I was doing it in the office or at home.
Hmm.
Um, and I notice here, and I will say my lifestyle is really, really different out here. I don't work in an office. I work for myself. I work from home. I have, really changed my lifestyle. But what I noticed from the people I know here who are working within office spaces and doing, um, going into the office on a regular basis, they are done at 5 for the most part.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know a ton of lawyers here, but the ones I know are done at 5.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of curious because, I still think that the East Coast of the U.S. does in many ways dominate how the whole nation kind of works. Um, Being in the Midwest, we're only 1 hour off of an East Coast, so maybe I feel that way more than Mountain or Pacific. But because East Coast will start meetings at 7, 8, 9. But I notice when you're working in an organization that is all the way across the country, 9 a.m. Eastern meetings is 6 a.m. Pacific. Like shift that baby a
Yeah.
little bit. But I don't think they do. A lot of people still have 9 a.m. meetings expecting West Coasters to get up at 5, 6 to be on these meetings. And it
Mhm.
surprises me, but there's really no good workaround either.
I mean, I think that depends on your culture and your organization.
And you know something about that.
Yeah, a little something.
So how did you get interested in that? How did you get interested in looking specifically at organizational and culture and DEI culture specifically?
I always say, like, I had the benefit of being in an organization that was grappling with the issues that are now being called DEI issues. We were calling them sort of oppression work.
Okay.
That was like the early terminology that was kind of adopted within my workplace, but it essentially addressed issues like hiring and diversity and making for inclusive spaces in the workplace and creating opportunities for people to have, affinity spaces and things like that. And we started doing that work in 2009.
Okay.
Um, in a real way. And I got to see, because I stayed in the organization long enough, the impact of it over time. I also got to see the places where we made mistakes or we learned that, the ways we tried to make change didn't always work.
Hmm.
And sometimes we had to adjust. Um, but I got to see the results and I got to see the impact and I got to see where it worked, and it worked in that our organization became, as we grew, a very diverse space. A lot of people came to our organization with the desire to work with us because they knew us to have a workplace that was, when I say diverse, I mean across many different lines of difference. And that was a draw. It became a draw. And so it started to create like certain types of conversations in the workplace about how we work together,
Yeah.
and certain conventions that were just accepted as part of professionalism began to get questioned because not everyone who came into the space came with the same kind of cultural expectations for how you interact with people, or
Yeah.
didn't all come with the same experiences or come from the same institutions and have kind of the same lingo and all of that. So it required, the work that goes into forming relationships across difference. And that got me really interested, because
Very.
that's like my life
Yeah. Right.
as a
Well,
person, living in the identities that I've lived in. I come from a multicultural family. And so I've always been sort of figuring out how to connect across difference.
very cool. So we've thrown out the term a couple times, DEI.
Mhm.
It's 2024. We think most people probably have figured out what that is, but not everybody. Would you like to explain?
Sure. And thank you, because, it's so easy to start with the acronym. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is what DEI stands for. Sometimes people will add on a B for belonging, a J for justice, or any number of other letters that kind of reflect what's important to them in their organizations as it relates to this work.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes they try to tie it to mission, where that's where I think the justice comes in. And that work is meant to bring to the workplace conversations about how we, I mean, this is my opinion. I think other people have other ways of describing it, but to bring conversations to the workplace about how we work together when we aren't all coming from the same places.
Yeah.
And how do we create workplaces where everyone who's there, regardless of their background, feels like they can be part of the team?
Mm-hmm.
And that really requires, for some organizations, a rethinking of how they operate. So looking at the basic operations of things like hiring and retention and onboarding and performance management and discipline. These are the kinds of things where, you have um, certain structures in place and we just kind of accept them as being, well, that's how you got to do it. And when you start to bring different perspectives into the workplace, you start to get different experiences. Like, hey, this operation, this particular way that we hire is having this kind of an impact, or this particular way that we have been handling discipline is having more of an impact on some members of our team than others. And we don't mean for that to happen, but that's what's happening. The same is true for things like compensation, right? Like that's, I think, one that we're pretty familiar with, like the ways that compensation isn't always equitable
Mm-hmm.
across a staff. And so I've seen a lot of like, how does that happen? And it can happen just over time. It's not always intentional, but not addressing it is where the problem lies. And so that's kind of how I got into really being interested in organizational culture, because I realized, you can shift it.
Yeah. Oh,
And how do you do that? And then I wanted to find that out. And so that's how I ended up in coaching.
oh, very cool. So I was thinking especially about onboarding. I mean, if you're first of all, if you're welcoming a diverse culture, yay. But then, onboarding, like you said, sometimes when you are welcoming a diverse culture, one group or one people might come in expecting that the culture will be like what they're used to. And maybe they're not ready to realize that they are going to have to adapt and adjust. So there must be, I mean, does that come into then the onboarding and just explaining, like, hey, here's the deal?
Yeah.
I think of I know it's probably hokey, but the movie or the TV show The Good Doctor, which is sadly wrapped up. But the hospital had to adjust to a brilliant but autistic young doctor who really definitely knew what he was doing, but really definitely had problems with communication.
Yeah.
And that's really what the show is about, way more than medical procedures.
Hmm. That's a great example. And I appreciate you using it, because a lot of times when we talk about DEI, we don't think about it broadly, and that the impact of DEI work actually is that it has impact upon a lot of different like work communities, including folks who might have learning differences or particular neurological differences. And that, I think, is something that a lot of folks who are in leadership don't always think about, right? Or don't always get a chance to engage with. And it's so important,
Hmm.
because it's just one of the many ways that people show up in diverse ways in the
Yeah.
workplace.
Yeah, I'm becoming more and more aware of just how I have a friend and she calls herself spicy, neuro spicy. I'm like, I
Very
like that
spicy.
term, but I
Hi,
hadn't,
me too.
right, right. And I hadn't really identified myself as being all that like different. I was like, yeah, I'm just like everybody else. But just in the last couple of months, I broke my foot. I broke several ribs. And yeah, fun way to start August. And
No.
no. And so my boating season ended abruptly, and I had a lot of time to sit and think and lay and rest and recover and dig in a little bit more on myself and realized, had some really good conversations with some people who really know me well and just kind of realized, why what I'm doing makes a difference, but also how I need to shift even how I work with people because In some ways, I'm just extraordinarily capable of seeing the world in a way that other people don't. So
Hmm.
I have to become a little bit more aware when I'm working with people that they can't shift or pivot as fast as I can. And
Hmm.
that's an adjustment, but I think it's not different than what you're talking about. It's just that as a solopreneur,
Right.
it'd be easy to try to work with people that are a lot like me, but I'm just discovering there's not a lot of people like me. So if I
Well,
want to stay in business, I'm going to have to shift a little.
right. I think it's a good realization for anyone who's in any kind of leadership to have. And I think you can be a leader even when you're a solopreneur. Just that
Yes,
aside.
well, we are.
But I do think that's really it's an important recognition because everyone's different than we are. We all have different ways of being. And I think we have had a sort of work culture that expected a lot of just kind of fitting in terms of what the rules are, what the expectations and standards are. And I think the more that things are shifting in terms of how we work together, whether we're working hybrid or remote, or it's creating all of these new challenges for us to sort of think about, well, how do we, what's important, first of all, about an office? And when we don't have that, what do we need to be thinking about as important for us to build relationships without having some sort of brick and mortar space where we're all going to be? I think that was the kind of democratizing force of like, well, at least we're all here in this building
Yeah,
doing this work at the same time.
yeah,
And when you add all of the sort of adjustments of post-COVID work life, it just throws a lot of different kind of wrenches in to how you form relationships and get work done together.
right.
It's fascinating to me. I think harder for the leaders who are actually doing the work. And those are the people I'm coaching now.
That was going to be my next question. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I
So,
said that's who you're working with. I wanted to touch on one other thing you mentioned, though, the equity, the financial equity. I mean, that's another issue with, I mean, I was talking with a business owner recently who said, yeah, when he brings people in today, given where things are at and cost of goods and things like that, he can't hire anybody for under a certain amount. And
mhm.
yet, people who've been working for him for 5 years pre-COVID, they're nowhere near making that amount. And so, even though these are, you know, we're not even talking about necessarily a difference in race or gender or spicy neuro
Yeah.
or anything, it's just time. And yet, the company also has to take into consideration they can't just bump everybody up to the new standard. That's just not financially reasonable. So there that gets it's a lot trickier than people think.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's great we're having these conversations because um, the reason why that particular compensation system ended up in that way is because it was set up not really anticipating that at some point we could end up with such a inflation rate that the new hires need to be brought up to a different level than their previous hires. How do you
Mhm.
think about creating equity for your work, for your staff? How do you think about that when you're creating a compensation system? And a lot of times that isn't always the long-term planning and thinking around that. And so I've
Yeah.
actually had the opportunity to work with organizations who want to think differently about how they compensate. And the organization that I just left, I happened to negotiate on behalf of the management our union contract, in which
Uh-huh.
obviously compensation was the biggest topic. It was actually took like a year
Sure.
to settle. And compensation ended up being the system ended up being revamped basically to create a base salary that everyone on staff has to make at least that amount. And then there were sort of add-ons that were agreed upon in terms of things like, if you're bringing a language skill that you use in your work, it used to be we never compensated for that. We just maybe added it to the job description and like hoped for the best. We're going to find someone with language skills, but we didn't always think about, well, we should be compensating that as
That's
a skill of the job. It's not just like, oh, by the way, can you use your language skills? Like you actually learned how to speak a language. So,
so I should pay myself more for speaking Swedish.
I mean, if you're using it at the
I'm
workplace.
not. I'm not. I am loving our whole conversation already, and I can't believe we've already been talking for 30 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it just flies by. But I do have some other questions I want to ask you about your just journey as an entrepreneur. I mean, you worked in a nonprofit, you worked as a professor. That's, no rules or regulations there, I'm sure. Yeah, I came from a teaching background too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you're a full-on free-floating entrepreneur. Got to go, hunt and kill. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
True.
But it's true. Um, what inspired your journey? What caused that shift?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was a reluctant shift
Okay.
because I was afraid that I would not be able to manage working for myself. I'm also the mom of two daughters who I've mostly raised alone. And so I knew like, okay, well, I also have a lot of responsibilities financially. Like, how am I going to make this work? And so it took some time, and I got to the place where I wanted this shift because I realized I had gotten into my 40s. I had like done all the work to get my career to the place I wanted it to be at. I was newly married. I had a small child. I just was like supposedly I'd just gotten a house. I was like, I've got all these markers of success that I've been working really hard for, but I feel like this isn't where I should be.
Uh,
And something kind of like clicked for me, like I need to be figuring out where I'm headed because I don't think I'm supposed to stay here. But that
uh,
took a little while. I mean,
and
you can't
oh
just
yeah,
do it overnight.
right. And when
Um,
was that?
I would say that started about a decade ago,
Okay. Yeah.
or
So it
maybe
wasn't
almost 15 years ago. But like about a decade ago, I kind of woke up like, yeah, something doesn't feel right. And I don't have a real vision for where I'm going, which is that like for me was new. Like, okay, that's new. Let's pause and figure that out.
yeah.
I think the reason why I didn't have the vision was I needed the pause to really become more self-aware. Like, are you doing what you want to be doing for yourself? Or are you the oldest daughter and you're still trying to please?
Hello, older sister. Yes. There. Yeah.
So some unraveling happened for me to kind of really get to full, like I'm all in.
Okay. So did you start your coaching so you started your coaching then in New York?
I did, yeah.
Okay. And were you full on coaching before your move?
I almost was. I had left my full-time legal work and I was consulting on a part-time basis with the same organization.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say almost,
Yeah.
because I still had a cushion in that I knew I was going to be like doing that work for some period of time and I could kind of expect a certain amount of income from that work. And so that gave me a little cushion to make the leap to full-time coaching and consulting.
Right.
Um, but overall, it took from sort of training and becoming a coach and doing the work and figuring out where I wanted to be focusing, because there's so many applications for coaching. I was like, well, what is my niche? And
Yeah.
leadership really came about because I found myself in leadership. And I found myself in leadership with, like, of course, no leadership training. Like, like I hear this story so often, like, oh, I got promoted, but I've never actually supervised anyone before. And they didn't actually upskill me so that I, could become a good supervisor. They just saw that I was really good at what I do and like said, well, let's give them, more responsibility. And
Yeah.
and so I think that that's the crossroads we're at, is we can't keep doing that to the people who are leading and the people who are being led by people who are leading without enough
Right.
support. And part of my desire to coach was and consult was to work with organizations to help them do better by their managers and do better by their staff.
Absolutely.
Particularly in this moment where so much is shifting and so much responsibility lies on, middle managers in the workplace to kind of pull off significant achievements, throughout pandemics and, shifting workplace norms and all of that.
Yeah. It's a lot. I was when I first my first sales job, second technically, but first in a really structured organization. Um, I took on the sales position, but in the hiring process, they said, they asked the question, what would you think about going into management? I said, if you are only hiring me because you're looking for another manager, don't hire me. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I just want to be outside sales for you, and I will be really good. And I was. But 6 weeks after hiring me, my manager took me on a car ride and he's like, so let's talk about management. I said, I told you.
Yeah.
And I just held my ground because I just knew I did not want to manage. And I still, eventually I owned my own business. Eventually I had to manage, and we had our own shifts in culture and realizations. I will actually credit BNI, Business Network International, for
Mhm.
making a really good shift for my business, because I didn't realize, in even being in BNI for a couple of years before I realized that some of the things that they incorporate into their meetings every single week, including education and recognition, when
Mhm.
you bring that into your business, it changes everything.
Yeah.
And so when I started bringing in weekly education and recognition and just a different way of approaching how we communicated, our business shifted as well. And it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Um,
It works.
Also in this past couple months, though, I've had an opportunity to say, who am I serving, even more at a deeper level. And it turns out it's people like you who, I'm assuming you kind of got into law school, and I could be wrong. Please correct me if I am. Did you go right from high school, college, law school?
I did not
You did
actually.
not. Okay, so tell that story quick.
Yeah, I had a bit of a circuitous route. I
Okay.
went from college to journalism school and
Oh,
had
that's
my
right.
first career was really in publishing in New York. And then in my early 30s, I went back to law school.
Okay.
At the time, I had a 2-year old. She actually walked across the stage with me when I got
Oh,
my
that's
degree.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that actually came about because of the experiences I had in my first career, and I actually went to law school thinking I was really going to be interested in working with artists and kind of protecting their rights in the marketplace. And I just got distracted by all the needs and the issues. And I was at a public interest law school, and so I ended up kind of
Oh.
focusing on working with, you know, populations that really couldn't afford legal services.
Yeah, for me, and we both again have that teaching background, I went into becoming a teacher. I had a moment where I just was after being not dead the third time in about that many years, I woke up and was like, okay. And for me, I just said, God, what do you need me to do? And the answer I got was become a teacher, which I had been resisting.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay. So I went back to college, took 7 years to finish my 4 year degree because I changed majors rapid,
Yeah.
completely, and became a teacher. As it turns out, I only taught for 5 years because it really wasn't what I was supposed to do. But the experiences and, teachers are now at least we're good at technology. We're good at speaking. We're good at presenting. Oh, you can be a good salesperson. You can be a good entrepreneur. And so taking those, and like you, You get into something and then you realize this isn't it. But you don't
Yeah,
always know where to shift to. And those are the people that, I know that I can help now because I've gone through those shifts a few times. And
right.
that's where coaching and consulting really is a beautiful thing. When
Mhm.
you're, in the years of wisdom, let's not say you should do this when you're 20
Yeah.
necessarily.
I mean, I think it's possible. We've definitely seen those folks who have it in them. But it is not for the faint of heart,
No.
this lifestyle. And there's so much that you're learning on the, as you're doing,
Yeah.
which works well for me, but not everybody
Yeah.
enjoys that kind of pressure.
It's a pressure. It definitely is. So in a minute, I want to ask you a little bit more about, who are you working with now? Has anything shifted in terms of new clients or new opportunities again, now that you're in a new space and new life kind of? Um, but I have one other question, and my frequent listeners will know the question that's coming, so
Ooh.
hopefully you don't. But so we kind of talked about your shift from, what you thought you were going to do in journalism. You shifted to law, then you thought you were going to do something in law. You shifted to something else. But I'm going to take you back further. So before high school, before maybe junior high school,
Mhm.
before you could really even do a job, before you could maybe even babysit, when you had the freedom to just be.
Yeah.
A long time ago for most of us.
Long time
But
ago.
you didn't, mom and dad trusted you, or mom or whoever trusted you to manage yourself a little bit during the day. And what did you do? What was your life? What did you enjoy?
The first thing that came to mind was reading. I was a voracious reader. I would go to the library every week and take out as many books as possible and read them all. My mom was like, please go outside and play. And I gotta finish my book.
I was the same. I used to joke, but I think I read most of my elementary school library.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't get enough. And I read very quickly because I just wanted like all the information and all the experiences and all the stories. Like I love a good story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would read just anything. I would read fiction, nonfiction, anything I could get
Yeah.
my hands on. And but to be fair, I was often reading in like a tree or a
That's
cozy
great.
spot outside. Yeah, we had trees and I could climb up in a tree and
That's
read.
the perfect combination.
It was great. I lived on a wetland in Minnesota and it wasn't that wet, so we'd like make little forts in the reeds and read. And my
Cool.
friends and I were all readers. Do you remember what's inspired that desire to know more or to read that much, do you think?
I think it was like a little bit of escapism,
Okay.
because it was all so different from my own life.
Yeah.
I was living a very kind of particular existence at that moment. So there, like, it'd be so easy to be different. So there were all these things happening in the world that I didn't have access to because for one reason, my parents did not believe in letting us watch very much television, and they also didn't let us watch the news, but they would let us read the newspaper. And
Okay.
so I think that was my entry point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So what I find fascinating with that question, and I ask it every show, is because oftentimes I see the relationship between what's making you happy today and what you're doing today back to, in our cases, that little person and
Yeah.
who we were as readers. We're still fascinated. We're still learning. We're still hungry to learn more, both of us
Yeah.
in that case, because we had that similar background there. But it doesn't matter. Whatever the answer is, it's almost always this like, and you're still doing that today.
That's so true. Even when I just said that to you, I was like, oh, that's right. I was reading newspapers. That's how I ended up as a journalist. Like,
Yeah. I mean, you started to esteem these people and hey, shocker, you
yeah.
thought you should be one of them. Yeah. I remember the first time I realized I was entertaining people with a story. I mean,
Yeah.
I was like 7 or 8.
Oh, I bet you loved it.
And yeah, just like, and I do not ascribe to astrological things, but I find it interesting that I'm born in August, which is, entertainer type.
Yeah.
And, but I soaked it in and I'm like, how do I do more? But really, I wanted to be a connector. I really wanted to know, how do people know so many people? And
Yeah.
yet, what do I do today?
That's right.
So it's fun. So tell us more, as we wrap up here, a little long even. Um, who do you work with? How can people find you? But who do you want to work with? Who's your ideal to work with? And are there any new things you're up to?
Yeah, great questions. So I'm working, as I mentioned, my favorite clients are people who are new to leadership and are trying to figure out like, well, what kind of leader am I? Like what is my leadership style? Because it's very unique. I also really love working with people who are in the middle of a transition. They feel like they are ready for change, but like aren't really sure where they're headed. And I love kind of getting them there. And in terms of new projects, I think of leadership very broadly, as I mentioned. And so one of the things I've been working on and I'm going to be sharing at the end of the year is an offering for folks who are curious about maybe they're ready to end a marriage, but they haven't figured out if they are ready and what they need to know. And that came about because of my own personal experience, but also having been an attorney and being a leadership coach. I've worked with folks who are going through divorce, and I like to bring to that work my legal experience, my own personal experience with a high conflict divorce, and my work with others. And this course is meant to kind of get you to understand what you need in the
Right.
process, what your goals are going to be if you decide you want to go that route, and all of that before you even think about who you're going to hire to help you get there. So that you are prepared, because it is really hard to go through something like that and have to engage a system that you're unfamiliar with, like the legal system. And it's really easy to be taken advantage of because you're in a vulnerable moment. And so my goal is to help folks like have the best possible experience they can have. And also to know that just like figuring out your leadership style, you can have your own divorce style. You don't have to end up, in the War of the Roses or whatever that movie was called,
I think
where they were
that's funny.
swinging from chandeliers. You don't have to do that.
Or you could.
If you want to, obviously, there is always that option.
I don't know. Just swinging from chandeliers kind of sounds fun. I don't know. Maybe not. Oh, fun. Okay, so how do people find you? Where do you hang out on social media? Do you have a website? And spell it, because
Okay.
a lot of people are only able to listen to us. But go
Right.
ahead.
Okay, so my website is this name of my business. It's long and I will spell it. It's www.transformative leadership collective. So TRANSformativeLeadershipCollective.com. And I am in social media. You can find me on Instagram under TL.collective. And you can also find me on LinkedIn under my name, my personal name. And I
Your
look
name.
forward to hearing
Spell
from
your
people. If
name.
you want to
Go ahead.
email me, you can email me. My name is Nasoan. That's Nasoan. And it's at transformativeleadershipcollective.com. Do you want me to spell that
It's
again?
a long, no, no. How many letters are in that name? I'm just curious. Have you counted? You should
I
count.
haven't. It's long. It's a lot. You're going to remember us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I was just talking with GoDaddy earlier this week. Funny story. Because I had a bad dream that my URL had expired.
Oh no.
So I woke up in the morning, I'm like groggy, coffee, like trying to log in, and then I couldn't, and just all the things. Finally, I got to a guy, and he's working with me, and he said, "Yeah, actually, the 3 or 4 letter URLs are the most expensive," which I'd never known. So if you wanted to try to get like
Right.
tlc.com, it would probably be a lot more expensive than doing the really
Wow.
ones. But I thought that was interesting. But the funny part was at the end of the conversation, because I have warm conversations, it's salt and light. And at the end of the conversation, we're hanging up, and he goes, "Okay, bye, love you." I put that on social
Great.
media so fast. I'm like,
That is great.
when,
You really just charmed him.
when the end of your when the end of when the end of your customer service call ends with the customer service rep saying love you.
Oh,
Oh, it was
terrible.
precious. So
Oh,
good. Well, Nasoan, this has been so much fun hanging out with you. I just love all your perspectives and everything that you shared with us here today. Definitely, anybody listening to this, if you got value, you seem approachable. I think they could reach out and talk with you.
please do. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So check her out, find her on social media. If I would say follow her, go and find her social media, follow her.
Mhm.
Obviously, when she's launching this new platform, we'll want to, give her props. And maybe hearing this, you're like, "Ooh, I know somebody who needs her." I do. So I will, we'll talk about that off air.
Okay.
Um, for anybody that's listening to this recording, remember you can come back and listen and be part of this every week live. This is a live recording. Um, I'm about to wrap up. Any final words from you, though? Please, Nasoan.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's been a real joy talking with you, and I look forward to, anyone reaching out who might find themselves in need of some guidance and a coach to walk them along the way. And my final thing that I will say is everybody knows what they need. We all have it within us. And I always see my work as just kind of helping you get closer to what you already know.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nasoan, and our guests and listeners for joining us on this journey to unleash your joyful business potential, which you know. And entrepreneurship and leadership is not for everyone. We get that. We are a minority, and leadership is a voyage that you can take together with others like you. So keep shining and aligning with your purpose. Come on back next week, every week, 2 p.m. Pacific time, exclusively on winwinwomen.tv, or find the show on YouTube. I've got it on YouTube a couple of different places, of course, on my websites as well. Go to leannlion.com. LeAnn has 5 letters, Leann. Lion is 4 letters, Ly as in yellow, on.com, and you can find everything that I'm doing as well. So come on back for our next inspiring episode. And until next time, this is LeAnn, your Chief Joy Officer, signing off. Keep leading with heart, and I'll catch you on the next wave of success. Farewell, and keep spreading joy.